Beverly has just come back from a trip to Iceland, where she has been on a photo expedition, you can say, a bird photo expedition. So we talk Iceland and birds and volcanoes and food and place. But we also speak about hoarding and how hoarding wealth or resources of some sense kind of is a societal trauma response to a lack of trust. More and just some lovely conversation is what you'll be getting if you hang around with me and Beverly for the next 1.5 hours or something. So I hope you do. I've been to Iceland 2016. The family was in Seattle and Vancouver, and going home, we flew with Iceland Air. And going home, I thought that we had 24 hours on Iceland, but it turned out we had 6 or 8 or something. So yeah, so we did the Blue Lagoon and nothing else. And but at least we were outside of the airport. But I have a friend who's Icelandic who lives here in Malmö, but also in Iceland, and she does some women's tours, like and we have another friend who's been to one of those, and she said it was just amazing. So
that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I think it is really cool. And my friend who does that, she's magnificent. You would love her. She's really, really a wonderful person. She's a psychotherapist and about to retire or getting towards retirement. But yeah, she's a wise soul with lots of heart. So I can just imagine going there and kind of being chaperoned or guided by her to this place that she loves so deeply. It's lovely.
Yeah.
But you've been to Iceland before?
Yeah, this was my second trip. And we do have a local guide who is the man who quite literally wrote the book on birds of Iceland, Johan Ole Humarsson. And he's a treasure. He's just wonderful. He knows so much, knows everything, just amazing person. Our van broke down, like basically at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere. And within 20 minutes, he had a solution. It's just, so basically we were at lunch and he was figuring it out.
So was it a bird photography trip?
Yes.
Okay. So people from all over were?
Yeah. Mostly because Greg's company, the tour leader, is in the States. Most of them were American. We had one absolutely wonderful woman named Carlotta, who was a little bit older, very careful about how much activity because she had a pacemaker. So you can't run up a hill because you can't, your body can't respond to that. Mm-hmm. But she did everything. In fact, she did sometimes more than I did. Mm-hmm. And her career was modeling. So here's this woman who was in the professional beauty arts and now is doing photography. And I'm pretty sure she's fairly close in age to my mom. And she's learning a whole brand new camera system. So not just the Nikon or the Sony, which is a mirrorless camera. It's like, oh my gosh, this woman has the courage to do so much. And that was really cool. That was really cool meeting her. And she was so graceful and not just, movements or anything like that. She was just, she knew that she had limitations that she hadn't had before her heart operation, but she was accepting of that and, providing herself a way to enjoy everything she wanted to. And, when she got cold, she was perfectly willing to accept a cup of tea that somebody brought to her rather than having to get up and do it. She was just, and to accept that really graciously. It was just such a beautiful soul.
Oh, lovely. How many people were you on the trip?
There were 9 of us as participants, the 2 tour leaders and Johan.
So 12 people. Yeah.
Yeah. In this blossom. It was like people Tetris. It was so small.
Yeah. But I mean, 12 people is kind of, that's a good, if it goes beyond that, you don't really have a chance to talk to everybody or but keeping it at 12 is, that's quite manageable from a social standpoint, kind of. At least that's my experience.
It's typically on these trips, a lot of the people are already retired. So I think I was the only one still actively working other than the tour leaders. And so that's always interesting. It's like, I took the boat and we went there. Wow. But typically, I've seen this before on these tours, that participants are people who plan their financial situation so well that they had the opportunity to retire when they wanted to and to do some unusual things. So one guy had taken his wife and kids, is like, we want to live a different way for a while. So they lived on a boat. They toured the Caribbean and Mexico with their kids when their kids were still young. And now, so they made really deliberate choices about how they wanted to be. And, that's pretty cool, too. That there are often people who are in the medical field just because I think it's the same reason that I'm drawn to it. It's, it's color and pattern and that biology. So, and sometimes there are a couple participants that you don't mind chatting with, but it's like, okay, we would not be trapped more. In a...
Yeah.
But, everybody comes there with a purpose, and they're all generous. The first card reader I pulled out of my camera bag was non-functional, and one of the guys jumped in and said, "Here, I have a spare one," and then I found the one that did work. I was like, "Oh," but that's pretty common. They share equipment, cables, knowledge, everything.
So, what was your purpose?
I wanted to go back to Iceland because I just fell in love with it. And
when were you there last time?
2015. So, and this was a different tour. We didn't go to any of the same places. It's always a little bit different when it's brand new than when the second time. But the tour for this time, we got to go to Grimsö. And
Grimsö.
Grimsö, yeah.
Grimsö, yeah.
It's north of Iceland, and the very tip of it goes above the Arctic Circle. And I got to go above the Arctic Circle.
Yeah, I've been too, but in Sweden. But I've been on the other side. Yeah.
So it was And Grimsö is largely unspoiled still, which is really sweet. There's, there's not much to it. It's really small, and most of the houses are on the southern ring road, and so our house was about halfway across there, and I could wake up at any time because the sun doesn't really, you don't ever have no light, and look out across and see the Icelandic headlands. And for me to look out at ocean, and there's just these wide vistas. Like, this is the road in my background. That's the road from Reykjavik to Akiri, it's road to Akiri. I think we were coming from somewhere else, but it's that wide spaces. Mm. It's so different from where I live, and I can almost feel myself expanding when I get into places like that. It's like, okay, maybe I'm not a holler girl. Mm. Hollers are a deep mountain valley where, and often very much wooded, and so everything is pocketed. Mm. It can start to feel a little claustrophobic.
But it's interesting, that thing. In 2014, I did Super Coach Academy, and we were it was like 4 long weekends in Santa Monica, New York, London, and then Santa Monica again. And when I was in New York, it wasn't my first visit to New York. I've been there before, but it was so palpable, the lack of, horizontal views. Because it's vertical. There's high rises all over. You don't see the horizon, in a sense. So I stayed at a B&B, a hostel up in Harlem. And so I walked down to where we had the venue. But one of the days I walked through Central Park, which, it's not big. Manhattan is not big, right? But just to get to Central Park, where all of a sudden I could see something going in a horizontal plane, not just vertical. Same thing that you say. Just this sense of breathing out. My entire being just goes, finally, there's a tenseness in the vertical. There's a tenseness in the small, in the non-vistas somehow, that was just so palpable. And then I remember that because it was such a visceral experience. So when I then, a couple of months later, was in London, a city I visited on numerous occasions, it is such a completely different place to Manhattan. It's yes, you can, in places there's high rises and stuff, but the horizontalness is there. You can see a skyline. You can see, it's like, so just this sense of, if I'm not very fond of big cities, but if I had to choose between New York and London, it would be London any day of the week, because of the presence of the horizontal. Just that.
Yeah. There are some cities I know I just could not manage. I've been to New York several times. I lived in Yonkers for a year. It's at that time I thought it was really cool because I was in high school, but now that beehive thing is like, the same thing with some of the very large cities in Asia, like Tokyo, Hong Kong, Shanghai. I don't think I would manage well because they're so closed in. Amsterdam, though,
yes, is lovely because it's a little town inside a big town, right? The center of Amsterdam is a small town. Yes.
It feels manageable.
Yeah.
And it offers so much.
Yeah.
You know, I spent a couple days there probably about 15 years ago, and it was lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a lovely town. I have not been to Prague, but I want to go to Prague because I have a sense that Prague is something similar. And for me, I am prejudiced towards old places as well. So Amsterdam, Prague, London versus New York, it's like it's not it's no wonder, even if New York had more horizontalness, I would still prefer the older places because I like old places. Well, it's interesting. Me and my ex-husband, we did. We were looking at used tablet presses for work because we worked at the same place initially, and wasn't really gonna do that. We were going to go to England to explore, but we did the tablet presses, and then we asked the person that we were speaking to, where do you think we should go? So he dropped us at the train station, said, take the train down to the coast. And so we did, and we were walking about without having booked anything, without having an agenda. It's like, yeah, we have a plane back to Sweden in 4 days or whatever it was. And the thrill of just walking about England, which is very doable in England because it's a small place in general. It's a fairly small island.
Fairly flat.
It's fairly flat. There is towns, it's like you can come across a small little village and then you walk out of it and then you walk on and then there's the next little village. So there's never really these like 15 hours of nobody around. That doesn't happen there.
Yeah.
But I remember one time, one of the days we were walking and it was kind of hilly, this soft green hilliness. And we walked around and come across this big old medieval castle ruin. And it's precisely. It was just, it's just such a thrill to be able to do these things where just, kind of beauty just is there. And you look around and there's something else. And you look around and there's something else. It was just, that was also such a wonderful experience.
It also gives you the sense that your history is present. It's not there. It's integrated into your life. You live with your history, so you don't forget it.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Yeah, and my brother was living in the U.S. at the time, and his two daughters were at that time not, 7 and 10 or ish around there. So we wrote postcards and sent them a postcard. And it was, it was before they moved to England, because they were about to move to England, but it was before. And we wrote a picture or sent a postcard of this castle. And they were like, oh, wow, because by then they'd been living in the U.S. for a couple of years. And it was just so cool to hear their reflection on this thing. They now lived in the U.S. where, anything older than 100 years or 120 years is like ancient.
Yeah.
Like, that really doesn't happen. Maybe Boston, right? but that's about it. Even Williamsburg is like built in the early 1900 something, right?
No, it's 1700s.
Yeah, but we were at the Williamsburg, whatever, museum townish.
Oh, and the reproduction.
Yeah. So they were reproductions, and we lived back here in a house from 1896, which was older than the reproductions of. So it was like, nah, sorry, but not impressed.
Colonial theme park.
Precisely. It was like, not impressed. Sorry, but not impressed. But yeah. So it's interesting, that thing.
So, yeah, it is funny that's one of the things I noticed most the first time I went to Europe, was that the definition of old is very different.
Yeah.
It changes your perspective when you can go back, not just a couple centuries, but easily a couple millennia. And the fairly recent political upheaval in the U.S., everybody's just, and yeah, there's some things that might be worth getting worked up about. However, we are still an adolescent country. We haven't been around that long. And it is not unusual that we're going to get a big old hairy zit now and then.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you don't get out the oxy-cream or whatever, but it's going to happen.
It's interesting, this thing about countries, too. I mean, Germany has not been around very long. Italy has not been around very long. There's been Prussia and whatever, all of these different, like, larger areas have been called, countries or fiefdoms or whatever, dukedoms and stuff. Yeah, precisely, right. But the concept of Germany is a young one. Italy is a young one. So it's like this thing of realizing that land, the long arc of time, the long arc of history, land is old, but it's not always been where it's at. It is shifting, only from our perspective, really, really, really slowly, right? But countries as such, yeah, well, no. They do kind of come and go. Sweden was, Sweden is what Gustav Vasa, I think you can claim, is the one who kind of Swedelized Sweden, right? Which is some 500 years ago or something. 1523, I think, or 26, something like that. But Sweden back then was something completely different than what it is now. And it's been, a large country, and it's been a smaller country, and it's had Denmark and Finland and Norway. It's like, so there's this... There's these shifts in what is a country too. I mean, Yugoslavia was also, a modern day construct, and then it fell apart again.
Yeah. I mean, countries are based on the ability of human beings to cooperate, which is sometimes quite limited.
Yeah.
There was a really interesting ethnography I read back, I was probably in high school, but the book was wonderful. It was called Cows, Pigs, Wars, and Witches.
Okay.
And the thesis of the book was that most of what caused strife was basically scrabbling over resources. And a lot of political and even religious power structures were based on trying to control resources. Marvin, I'm blanking on the author's name, fairly well-known anthropologist. And this was written for the public. I dragged that book around for a long time. My dad got a master's in anthropology when I was in high school, so. And whatever he read, I was reading.
Yeah, and then we come to this thing of resources again that we've touched on before. How this concept of I was listening to. This is an interesting. Maybe this should be a Tankespjärn Zoom topic. Resources. I was listening to an episode of the Mythic Masculinity podcast, which it's an interesting podcast. I've listened to 2 episodes, 43 and number 42, I think. 42 is with Maya Luna, who's a wild woman, you can say. She calls herself a feral woman, but they speak about the concepts of masculinity and femininity as we kind of know it, and how, to a large extent, what is masculinity is, you have the freeze, fight, flight, fawn, like reactions to dangerous situation, where masculinity, this is what Maya Luna had written somewhere, is like, in large parts, is the fight response. It's like it's the harsh, you're fighting and you're strong and you're virile and you can protect and all of these things, whereas the traditionally feminine is more the fawn response, which is the caretaker, the calming the waters and doing everything you can to make sure that things work smoothly, etc. But they then said something that I thought was so interesting. They said, if you look at society today in the nuclear family and stuff, you have people who hoard. We hoard money or food or clothes or, gold watches or whatever it is that we're hoarding. Which in a society of a nuclear family where it's like it's 2 people to provide for a family, it makes sense. In a village construct or a tribal construct, it really doesn't make sense at all to hoard. Because if we know that, we take care of each other, hoarding would be like the farthest thing from your mind, because it does not make sense at all on an individual or like a small unit. It's like the village can surely have use of having, grains, in a silo somewhere to make sure that we can last through the winter and stuff, but not on an individual basis. Yeah. And I thought that was so cool. So he was saying, Ian something or other is his name, who runs the show, the podcast. He was saying this hoarding aspect, in a sense, is our societal trauma response to where we're at, kind of corresponding to this fight and fawn aspect. It's like, it's on a societal level. I just thought, oh man, this is so interesting.
Well, when you place it in that context, it becomes understandable, because in some societies, the U.S. is one, the safety nets for those who do not have enough are not particularly strong. So if you fear that, the society around you will not protect you if you come into need, then naturally you're going to hold on to...
Precisely. It makes perfect sense. But if we look at it from that angle of it being a kind of a response to the situation at hand, but not inherently human, not this is what humans do. It's like, yes, this is what humans do in a context where you're not safe. Makes perfect sense. It's a trauma response. And so, yeah, I listened to that. I've listened to that episode 3 times. And I listened to it, part of it this morning. And that was the first time that I really hit home on what they were saying in this little part of it. And it just went, ooh, that feels so spot on. And is then a very logical, reasonable, absolutely relevant response to a situation that is basically about a lack of trust, a lack of faith, a lack of knowing that we help each other out. If we need to, we help each other out. If we don't have enough food, then we will starve. If you don't have enough food and I have enough food, I'm not going to make you starve. I will give you some of mine, because it's like when the food runs out, we don't have any left. And it's just, I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, that, and then there's so many layers to that, the Protestant work ethic and, the independence standard in many communities in the U.S. It's like, if you can't do for yourself, then there's something wrong with you. That's not always true. No. Circumstance does play a very large role in what we're able to do and how we're able to succeed. So it's not all internal. And being able to recognize that even if you have, every internal strength in the world, if you can't get a good education, if you aren't well fed, if you're in an area where people who look like you can't buy a home, success is not going to be on an even playing field. No. So accepting help, accepting that the society at large it's part of a contract. If you participate, you are allowed to gain benefits. As somebody who has been blessed with resources, I don't see any conflict between the idea that I want the best for myself and saying I'm going to donate, some money to that school or to that program, or I'm going to buy for this company that gives. Because if the people around me don't do well, where's the society I'm functioning in? Yeah. So to me, it is selfish to want people around me to do well, because then my life is better too.
And I usually say this is why me at my best, what do I need to do? How do I need to be? What do I need to act on in order for me to be at my best, so that I am at my best for the people around me, right? Not so that I'm stronger than, richer than, whatever, and can step on everybody else, because then we kind of end up where you're pointing to, right? But rather, when I'm at my best, so me being selfish in that way, make sure I put the oxygen mask on myself so that I'm healthy and able and functioning, because that's how I am of the greatest service to everything around me. So this is where I think the concept of individualism has kind of lost. It's like it's unmoored. Is that what you say? When it's like it's free flowing, it's not
it's not connected to a larger structure.
No, precisely. And the larger structure is the collective. It is the collective. So we don't need these unmoored individuals floating around bumping into each other, but I'm bigger and stronger, so I can bump into you and just harm you and not myself. It's like, no, we need strong individuals tethered to the collective, connected to the collective, so that the collective will manage when somebody falls sick, when somebody needs help, when mudslides hit or earthquakes, or, it's like, that's why.
Yeah. In some ways, it comes down to the appropriate use of economies of scale. I think some things that need to happen big need to be at scale. So disaster response is one of those. To really marshal resources, you need some umbrella organization like the federal government to say, we're going to collect, 60,000 water trucks and send them over there where they don't have fresh water, whatever. And at the same time, there are some things that don't need to be at that scale. You do not need a 700-acre solar farm. You need to put a solar panel on every roof in a town and leave the 700 acres as a park. So we haven't figured out scale. And I think that's something that is more appreciated in places that have gone through more evolution. In America, everything's big. Everything's, from our burgers to our farms to, everything's big. And big is not necessarily better. You have to ask what it's for. So,
which is just when it comes to the hamburgers, it's so interesting to see, the US hamburgers and French fries and 1.5 liters of Coke or a gallon of Coke or whatever, or Mountain Dew, this horror of a horror. It's like, oh, yuck. But if you then look at French cuisine, they're drinking wine and eating red meat and eating cheese and pastries. It's like, how? We're not supposed to have, fats and this and that and the other thing. It comes down to size. Look at an American lunch from whatever fast food company, and compare the size of that to a French lunch. It's like, you can eat really good stuff. But if you stuff yourself so full that you can't walk, it's not going to be good for you, right? So you can eat really shitty stuff. That's huge, a huge amount. Yeah, that's not going to be good for you either. It's like, so it's so interesting to see how scale is, like you say, it's from the very smallest thing, really, up to, okay, we have a globe. What do we need to do on a global scale to manage those things that are actually global?
Yeah. Yes, the food thing is really interesting. Having just been in Iceland for almost 2 weeks, I got really used to the breakfasts where usually you have some bread whole grain bread and a little bit of cheese and meat and vegetables. And always some sliced cucumber and usually tomatoes. And it's like I get used to that. That, sort of that, almost like a lunch at breakfast. And, we'd eat breakfast before 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was 2 o'clock before I was hungry again. That kind of breakfast. So I started doing it here. I have English cucumbers and a bag of radishes in my fridge. And it's amazing that one radish and a piece of cucumber that's about an inch long is like, that's all you need. Yeah. Just that bite. But that freshness somehow makes the rest of breakfast last, and it's a piece of bread with, I found some, it's not Danish, but it's decent Gouda, which has more flavor. And so those little pleasures, you start the day with that little pleasure.
And it's so, when I was a foreign exchange student in Lincoln, Nebraska, 89-90.
Holy cow.
Yeah, precisely. Because
Nebraska.
I asked.
Hogs and cattle.
Yeah, I asked to come to the coast because I was, I'd lived down here in Malmö, and then we'd been up further north, a third of the way up in Sweden. And I didn't I got as close to the ocean, to both oceans, you can say, because Lincoln, Nebraska is right smack in the middle. But I had a friend we took German together. And she had German ancestry, and so she had some connections to some German bakery. So she brought me a loaf, a German loaf. This is bread. I craved that thing. Because the Wonder Bread thingy is like, that's not bread. It should not be allowed to be called bread. And my host
some
family,
kind of polymer, including wheat.
it's like, oh, that's not it. And my host family, sweet as they were, it's like, no, it was that type of stuff around. Pop-Tarts. I had Pop-Tarts for breakfast. It's like,
I didn't like those even as a kid.
It is, there's not a lot of fresh there. Right? But
which is, it's in the middle of farming country.
Yeah, but no. So when I think it was like November or December when she got me this loaf of bread. And it was kind of the same situation as when I went into Central Park in Manhattan, the sense of, I didn't know that I missed actual bread as much as I missed actual bread. So just to get that was such a treat, because it's like, it's real. It's like, this is real. This is what it's supposed to be. Whereas the polymer, containing some parts of wheat is like, no. No.
I got lucky. Probably about the time we lived in Huntington when I was a kid, my parents were looking for ways to, be pretty frugal. My dad learned to bake, and so he would make a lot of the bread that we ate. And I can remember, in fact, it was probably about this time of year, because the wild blackberries would be in season. And so we would go out, we'd pick all the blackberries. My mom would make jam and my dad would make bread.
Yeah.
And at the end of an evening, we would have this chunks of fresh hot bread to wipe across the pot that the jelly had been made in. It was just magic.
Yeah. Yeah, working with what's there. Like, there's something to that. But this is my kind of, again, I'm prejudiced against old. I'm prejudiced against these types of things too. Or, it's like, so I'm a I can do jams and saft, we call it in Swedish, kind of syrup, but it's not. It's something else. Or cordial, but it's not. It's something else, but it's really good. And just get into it. I can, and I do. When I do, it's like it's usually too much, and then we don't eat it. But it's fun to do.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a gatherer in me. I have fairly strong gathering instinct. So as I was walking Sigge the dog this morning, you have the poop bags, right? And the wild plums, small wild plums, mirabelle is one of the words in Swedish for them, I think. They are just starting to drop out in the, I live next to a recreational area. So I'm filling one of these poop bags without poop in it, of course, an unused poop bag. But it's just,
I would assume.
Yes. And I've done that. I don't know how many times I've done that. And, if I had a hoodie on, I would fill the hoodie and walk with it, or stuff my pockets,
or a big sweatshirt. I'd be pulling it
precisely, pulling up my shirt and keeping it in there. It's like, it's just, I want to make use of what's there.
Yeah. Well, and plums, you could make wonderful, like pie fillings or ice cream spreads.
Yes. Krikon is one of the words in Swedish for them too. I didn't know what they were until maybe 15 years ago or something. But and people on, there's lots of people who live here in this neighborhood where I am. And there's loads of people walking in this, running and whatever they're doing in this recreational area. Not a lot of people go picking those wild plums. Not at all.
Yeah, it seems true that there's a cemetery down the hill from me. And when I had a husky, my beautiful Jessie, they used to walk her down there. And along the back edge, there was just this wall of blackberries. And I would pick them and bring them back. And I never got, because I'm one person handling 2 dogs and a little cup, I never got enough to make anything out of. But I would, sometimes macerate it with a little bit of sugar and put it into yogurt, or have it with breakfast cereal.
Yeah.
And it's just that. And for me, that was just enough, because it's like what I don't eat, I know the birds will get, or the turtles. And it's like the idea that there's something, maybe it's macabre, that on the edge of a cemetery where people's remains are returning, there's this wall of goodies that supports all the life around it, including mine.
Yeah. I've actually, and my kids have also picked up on this. Blackberries must be one of the most successful, like, berries or plants around. Because we have blackberry brambles here and at my mom's place, and we go picking, filling the freezer. In the UK, you can pick blackberries everywhere. They're blackberry brambles, alongside fields and pastures and stuff. And you just pick and pick and pick and pick. In the US, there's blackberries. I don't know how many blackberries we ate in Vancouver. It's like you're walking in the town and there's blackberries, and people aren't picking. We're picking because it's like we gather, we eat. And even the kids, when we were in Seattle and Vancouver, that was 2016. So the kids were 12 and 15. No, 12 and even more. Let's see. 11 and 16 maybe. Well, whatever. They picked up on it, said, we're eating blackberry here too? And that made me go, I actually Googled it, trying to find out blackberry, but I couldn't pinpoint where do they come from? What's the origin? Because they seem to be very successful.
Yeah. In part because it's basically a vine. And a lot of those vining plants are, they proliferate both by seed and by runners.
Yeah.
So they can travel.
Yeah.
I don't know the botanical history. There are a lot of plants like that have gone worldwide in relatively little time. The history of roses is really interesting. They're originally from Asia and came to Europe basically as an apothecary product because of the perfume and the rose hips. And then from Europe, they went everywhere, knocking stuff over. Luckily, not my coffee. I think tulips, Michael Pollan has a book about, I think it's Michael Pollan, about 5 plants, talking about tulips and roses and a couple other things, apples, and how botany traveled with people.
And I had, who was that? I had a friend visiting who lives up north. I had not understood that you don't grow apples in all of Sweden.
Wow.
Because
really?
there's parts of Sweden that's above the tree line or the apple line. And I went, what? You mean you don't have an apple tree? You don't have apple trees? It's like, I had not. This was, I don't know, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that I got that I understood that. I had no idea. Because down here, everybody has an apple tree or two. It's like they just grow. But no, they don't grow in the north of Sweden. The season is too cold. It's too cold for them.
Too cold and probably not
enough sun.
The short growing season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just shocked me. Because what do you mean you don't have apple tree? I was like, what? But yeah, plants are successful in spreading. Humans are successful in spreading too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of weird that as a human, I look for places other humans haven't been, which makes them hard for me to get to, but
Have you seen Vikings? It's the HBO series, I think. Quite a lot of seasons of it. I watched it not this winter, last winter. I watched.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, it was, it's like the first 3 seasons are really good. Then it's kind of, okay, the story type. But in one of the latter seasons, they go to Iceland, which is then a nothing. There aren't people there. And it's quite interesting to just think, to kind of travel with them in their open boats across, it's quite a ways away between Norway and Iceland. It's not done in a day or two. It takes some time. And they didn't have really sheltered boats and stuff. They were open to the wet. It's like, and then coming to Iceland, where still it does look like it does in the back for you. It's like these gigantic vistas of just gorgeousness.
Well, I'm figuring it takes some doing to land a boat in Iceland, because most of the shoreline is cliffs.
Yeah,
you
need to find
doesn't have a lot of harbor.
Yeah. But from where I'm looking, or at your background here, which is this mountains and meadows and like...
Yeah, we were...
It looks kind of like New Zealand, because it looks kind of like Lord of the Rings. It's that type of kind of scenery.
Yeah. So a lot of the mountains in Iceland are not all that high. I think it's because of the latitude that they're still snow covered in the glaciers, and it is sort of this beautiful green rolling, and much of the landscape is volcanic. So I did get to see the edges of the lava field of the volcano that's active now. The very first day. So I get up on a Friday pretty early. I have to drive to Cincinnati to fly to Boston to fly to Reykjavik. And so I get to Reykjavik. I don't know what the heck time zone I'm in. I have not really slept. I get a shower. It's early morning there. And before I've had a chance to go to sleep, I get a phone call in the hotel. It says, "We're going to the volcano. Want to go?" Yeah. Okay. It's like, I haven't slept, but I've never seen an active volcano. No. As it turned out, this lava field is quite large. And to get to the active part, you had to go up a really steep, slippery hill. It's like, I know I physically cannot do that in the state I'm in right now. So I stayed at the lower one, but I got to take a picture of real lava. And just, you could smell the kind of odd sulfury fumes. You could see some of the wisps. The folks who hiked another 45 minutes straight up got to see the active part. It's like, I'm glad it's there. I'm glad they got to see it. I know it would have been beyond my physical capability.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
So is that one that has that one been active for a long time, or is it just a little tiny one, or what?
It's the one that's been kind of spurting since about May. So it just became active again. And it's so interesting if you watch the video footage when it first started and now when it every once in a while it sort of dribbles out some lava. I mean, not that you can just sort of dribble several tons of revoltingly hot rock, but
that's what it does, though.
And the people would go and visit, they did go and look at it, but I don't know of any actual reports of anyone being injured by it. People were generally respectful of the power of this stuff, and they're already making plans. It's like, okay, we need to rebuild some roads, and they just take it in stride. This is what our land does. This is what we'll do to respond to it. We're not trying to cap it off or whatever. It's like, yeah, try to cap that. Just come out somewhere.
Yeah, it's like, that sounds like a really, really dumb idea.
Yeah. So it was just I kind of, it's about knowing where you live and what the appropriate response is, which is cool. So, I don't.
No, yeah, well, there, yeah.
That's the lava field. So that black thing.
Yeah, in the middle.
Yeah, so I actually went down and touched that one part that was way out at the end, because and you can tell it's not hot.
Yeah.
So it's and we have volcanoes in Washington and Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the response is quite the same.
You don't think? Said with a little irony.
Yeah, in part, it's because of the number of people in the population. There are so many more people, so we have so many more chances to find one that is not going to do the smart thing.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's also a sense of place that is perhaps lacking. I mean, I think it glimpsed past me the other day on Twitter, the amount of, or the length of time an American in general stays in one place. It's like, there's a lot of people, far from everyone, but there's a lot of people that are moving all over the U.S.
That happened when I was a kid. I was born in Michigan and grew up there for about 10 years. And then because of my dad's work, we had a series of moves. So he's 2 years here, 2 years Morgantown, a year and a half in New York, and then back to Michigan and several different places. And so as a kid during those formative years when I was a teenager, we were somewhat rootless.
Yeah.
And that, in part, that's one reason I've been in the same house for 25 years. It's the longest I've ever been in one place.
Yeah, this is the longest I've been here too, and that will be coming up on 18 years, I think, on December 13th. But the sense of place, again, when you have a history and a sense of place, your response to what happens in that place is likely really different than I've been here a year and a half and oh shit, there's a volcano, dribbling lava on me. Right? But if you have lived there your entire life or your family has been rooted there for 100 years or 200 years or 300 years, your response is likely a very different one because I'm guessing you have stories. You have story. It's in you. It's in your body in a way that it cannot be when you haven't rooted. It's this a little bit the same as with the individual and collective aspect. It's like that.
Yeah.
Sending down roots into the community, into the place you're living, will affect how you respond.
Yeah, sense of place is really interesting. I actually wrote a series of interdigitated stories once called Place.
What? Interdigitated?
Interdigitated. So digit is fingers, so they're somewhat interwoven. They didn't actually refer to one another, but they were the way it appeared as I wrote it. They would have a piece of one and then a piece of another and then a piece of that one. And so they would go back and forth. And one of them was a semi-fantasy piece where a woman enters a new landscape and semi-recognizes the same feeling from when she was a child, even though she's never been there. And it's like the place takes hold in her before she takes hold there. And she becomes part of its mythic structure almost effortlessly. And so it's like the surroundings are instructing her. And most of us are not quite that receptive, but it is possible to get a sense of the land. I've experienced that once or twice. It is it's not really disorienting because you are entirely oriented when it happens, but your thinking brain is like going, what, and the rest of you is going, I know this.
That's a good description. Yeah. How many pictures did you take? How many photos did you take?
Probably, I took a lot on the phone, where I did a lot of the landscapes on the phone because it's easier. And
they do good pictures nowadays, phones in general.
Yeah, so I probably have 100 or so pictures on the phone, and somewhere in the order of about 6,000 from the camera that I have, so I have a lot of work to do in Lightroom. I haven't even downloaded the last card because we typically shoot up to the last minute and then we're, out of there.
Rushing to the airport, yeah.
And I actually bought the lens that I rented to take with me. I work with this company called Lens Rentals where you can borrow equipment that you don't have yet. And they have a program where a small amount of the rental fee will go toward purchase if you want to keep it. And the lens that I rented was a compact telephoto. And it doesn't have quite the aperture that the larger ones do, but it's so much easier to carry.
Which is an important facet of it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really matter if you have a great one, but it's at home.
Yeah. So I decided to buy it, and I've already been playing around with it, shooting butterflies up the slope.
I've seen some of your butterfly images.
Yeah. Most of those were probably taken with the phone.
Oh, wow.
But
that's gorgeous, though.
Yeah, they're so beautiful. And that's one reason I don't cut that slope, is that we, especially right now, the land for pollinators is not all that abundant. And if every butterfly in the county is coming to my slope, it's like, I gotcha.
Yeah, I can see why you wouldn't want to cut it.
Yeah.
So what do you do now with the photos? Is it like, okay, of those 6,000, you'll throw away 3,000 because they're not good enough? Or is it?
Yeah, if I'm being good about going through them, what I immediately do most of the time is go through the library and reject the ones that are out of focus, or it's all that's left of the bird is that much of tail feather, because that happens a lot. I get a lot of puffin butts. Puffin boats are cute. And so you reject the ones that, it's like, okay, there's nothing there and it's not in focus. And then you start to settle on, okay, what is workable? And what I'll probably do this year is what I've done in the past is create a calendar that I give to family and friends. Some of them I keep in albums or slideshows. A lot of people find some commercial use for their photos. I don't, it's not too likely for me because I still work full time. I don't have the time to put into a commercial photography enterprise. But I do like making the calendars because, and my family loves them. So.
But yeah, I'm the photographer in the family, and I love doing photo books. So when we've been on vacation, I do photo books. But it's at the same time, the travels where I most want to do the photo books are the least likely to get the photo book because I have, so many pictures. So it's such an endeavor. So we were in India in 2013, 14, whatever it was.
Wow.
I still haven't done the photo book for that. The Seattle, Vancouver trip in 2016, still I haven't done the photo book for that. But I know if we're on a trip or I have it's like I want to make a photo book. If I have around 1,000 pictures, I know that I can get a good photo book out of it because, as you say, half of them are like just right? But then you can kind of play around with the rest of it.
Yeah, and I have made books. Typically, when I would do them is after I'd been up north. I used to go visit my parents at the house near Gaylord every year, and take photos around their little pond in the house and any place my dad and I would go wandering. And then I would make a photo book and I always shared that with them. That after a lot of things took a hiatus after my dad passed away because we were so close. I do really enjoy that. I kind of like Scott Gilbert on the platform, that mix of photos and words. It's really alluring.
Yeah. Because that's what I do too. I have, it's like I have some really good one. And these are photo books that I usually get them in a couple of copies because I want to, I've gifted to my mom or to my grandma when she was alive and stuff, knowing that they will come back to us. And then when the kids move out, they can get a copy. So there's a few, but it usually takes me, at least 40 hours. I'm guessing 60, 80, depending on how many pictures there are. But it's like you say, I really like it. And I did one we visited my brother in 2006, right before they left for the UK in 2007. And that photo book is just, it's gorgeous. It's great. And the internet is so great too, because if you kind of remember, what was the name of those waterfalls we were at, and you Google it and you find it, and you can sort of play around, like you say. So it's part, we did this here and here's this person, but it's also we were at this place and here's a little story about that place. Where does the name come from or whatever. So yeah, I really like doing that. But I haven't done one in a long time.
Yeah, the photography is one reason I have like every field guide known to man. Because if I've taken a picture of it, I want to know what it is. So I even have books of the wildflowers of Iceland.
To find it. So did you see any birds that you haven't seen before? What's the birds on Iceland? Puffins, I'm guessing they have. But that's about puffins, what I know.
There are a number of species of gulls. There are lots of shorebirds. I got to see black-tailed godwits, which are gorgeous birds. They were not close enough to photograph. The white-tailed eagle, which is an impressive bird. He was a very long way away. It's not photographable. Saw several gyrfalcons, which I have seen before, but they're rare. And pink-footed geese. So if you've ever seen the movie The Big Year, the pink-footed goose is like this incredible find for a bird watcher. And if you're doing one of these big years, and people will fly thousands of miles to see one.
Oh, cool.
And so I saw two whole families just waddling down the road.
So are you, in Sweden we have the 500 list and whatnot, they call themselves, how many bird species are you one of those? Do you like...
I do. I keep a life list. I'm up over 600. Because I've been a birder a long time.
Taste.
I'm not what they call a ticker. So somebody who sees a bird for 30 seconds says, okay, tick that off and just leaves. Because I want to know what the bird's doing, what is...
Nej. Taste. There's noise outside. Nej. He looks at me and he goes, maybe I can sneak out into the hallway and I can bark again. Nej, lägg dig ner. Ja, lägg dig ner.
That's so funny. People think dogs don't have emotions. Don't be ridiculous.
Yeah, they sure do. They sure do. Oh, he was yesterday, he was naughty. So he's soon to be 5, and we've dog sat him since he was like 2-3 months old, a couple of times every year. And now he's clever enough, so he stays close to me, basically. But I've had the door open because it's been summery. And yesterday he heard something and he went out onto the street, and I went after him, shouting his name, saying, "Come here." I go out to the sidewalk and he's just 10 meters down. And he looks at me and he goes, head down, don't look at me. Slowly, very slowly coming back towards me, walking up on the front. And I was saying, you don't do this, Sigge. You do not. You stay here. And he lay down, rolled over, belly up, going, I know I did wrong. I know I did wrong. He's so cute.
Yeah, they know about interaction.
They know about interaction for sure. But yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it was, in terms of the biology, it was an interesting trip, getting to see more of puffins. And so the absolute funniest thing about puffins is I had seen them several, the first time we went, both on Flatey, which is an island in the western fjords, and Breidavik, which is this huge 40-meter cliff on the western side of Iceland. And those puffins, they're not hunted there, so they're not very afraid of people. So they would walk right up to you. The puffins on Grimsö, they are hunted, and so they're not as trusting of humans. But when the entire island is ringed with cliffs, and when puffins are landing in a wind, they're often, there's a curve in the cliff. They'll come around that curve, and if they're landing here, they'll come up, and then they'll hover in place and literally back into the cliff. And it's just so cute. And when they take off, so they do this little hovering thing, and then when they take off, They lean forward, they put their wings up, and then they do this beep, 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 beep. Their little wings are going like this. And they look, I don't know if your kids watch this movie called A Bug's Life.
Yeah.
So do you remember Heimlich?
No.
Heimlich was this huge caterpillar.
Yeah.
And when Heimlich went through metamorphosis at the end, he still had this huge body and these two little teeny wings. And so when he flew, he would be like, dee, 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 dee. And the puffins looked just like that. It's just taking off from the cliff, and they're going, dee, dee, dee. It's hilarious to watch them. And then, they'll eventually flatten out and
but get into the wind. Yeah.
It's so cute.
So what did you eat? What do you eat? I mean, because I'm a vegetarian. That's one of the things that I've gathered about Iceland. It's like it's maybe not the optimal place for a vegetarian.
It is more difficult, especially in the places where we were that, they're guest houses, so they often cater to people who are not vegetarian. They did, most of the places we went to, we had one person in our crew who ate mostly vegetarian, and they would provide vegetables for him. So broccoli and cauliflower salads. But we ate a lot of fish. And in fact, one day, there's one restaurant on Grimsö. It was run by the brother of the woman who ran our guest house. So everybody's related.
Small place. Yeah.
He got a fresh halibut from a fisherman that morning, and he emailed Greg or texted Greg and said, if you want, we can prepare this for your dinner. I was like, oh. Yeah. So we ate very fresh halibut. The kitchens tend to be fairly adventurous, so they play around with seasoning and different kinds of sauces. The food was, in general, very good. Yeah, some desserts. I don't typically lean on desserts much, but and soups. Oh, the fish soups were so good. There was a couple of them on this little island that were just rich. They probably make a broth with the leavings, and then they put in vegetables. At one time, there was even sun-dried tomatoes in the broth. It's like, oh, it's so good. So this combination of fresh fish and all these nice vegetables and seasonings. There are some seasonings that were unfamiliar to me. I was assuming, there are some products available there that aren't elsewhere. Things like lichen and maybe some native herbs that were really interesting. And breakfasts were mostly breads with a little bit of cheese and meat and skyr. Oh, skyr. The yogurt.
Yeah.
So good. And I was like, I want some skyr. So I go to the grocery store when I get here. We're not exactly a metropolitan area, and the two brands available, it's like a hint of yogurt culture and a whole lot of polymers. I'm like, oh man, this tastes like crap.
Yeah, not the same thing. No.
Not the same thing.
No, I can imagine that. So, do you want to go back? Is it one of those, oh yeah, I'm going to come back? Oh yeah, you're going to come back.
There's a writers' conference. There's the Iceland Writers Symposium every April. And they bring in a lot of really good writers. So I would like to do that sometime. Then maybe have some extra days. Maybe to go back up and visit Hatla in Grimsö. Just to be up there. I mean, I've been lucky the times that I've been there. Our tours are all inclusive, so I don't pay for anything other than snacks. Oh, and the snack story. That was hilarious. I get into trouble when I buy stuff when I can't read the label. So, I like me some chocolate. So
that's a very good trait.
Little gas station place, and I buy a bottle of water, and just my water jug was still in my suitcase. And I looking around, it's like, oh, that looks like, I can tell that's whatever's on that candy bar. It has chocolate on the outside, and it's got something green. It's like, oh, that must be chocolate mint. So I buy this.
It was not.
It was. So the name on there was Lakris.
Yeah,
and that's when I realized it's licorice.
It's licorice. It's called lakrits in Swedish too.
And this is not a taste Americans are used to, especially when you're expecting chocolate mint. So first of all, I got to break it. It's like, what is this? Yeah. Rubbery. So I bite it and like, oh, not the flavor I was expecting.
I love licorice.
It is. I don't know that I've ever had it coated with chocolate before. It's a really...
No, that doesn't really sound that yummy, but...
It was an odd combination. Not...
bad?
Unpleasant. Just unexpected. Especially if you're expecting like a Thin Mint or something.
Yeah, it's very different from that. It's very different. But I like licorice, but there's, even here where licorice is, it's common. There are still people here who go, nah, I don't like it. And I go, how can you not? It's really yummy. And I have a bronze fennel in the garden that, I'll just take a bite of those fennel leaves and just nibble on it because it has a really lovely licoricey flavor. It's yummy. I love that.
Yeah, I like. There's in fact a really delicious vegetarian stew called Icarian Stew that you make with fennel. I found out about it several years ago when I read the Blue Zones, and when they published about it in the New York Times, they had that recipe for an Icarian stew that is, it's tomato and onion and fennel and all these layered, yummy flavors. I remember that one in particular because when I read that, I was doing a book discussion group that was based around food for our local library. And so each time we would read the book, have the discussion, and I would bring some food from it. I mean, to me, that's like total playground.
Yeah.
So I made cheese in there one time, and I brought the Icarian stew. It was so much fun.
Do you have that recipe?
I do. I may have it easily available. Oh, I even have, let's see. I have something called the Blue Zones Cookbook, but that's not entirely it. Let me see. Here's the New York Times version. Okay, so it's similar. I'll drop this one into an email to you from the New York Times.
Yeah, do, because then I can add that to the show notes. Because it sounds yummy. It's so interesting. I'm still, next week I'm going up to my mom's place, which is an hour and 10 minutes by car. So it's close. And I'll be happy to be there, and I'll be happy to see her. But I really don't want to go anywhere except out into the garden. I was like that last year. I was like that the year before, even though I traveled to too many places that year. But it's like since 2 years before, 2 years pre-COVID, I've been like, oh no, can I just please be home? I don't want to go anywhere. So even though I can sense into your delight in being in Iceland, and I can look at the scenery and go, oh, wow. And then I go, but I'm very happy where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, I do everything a season.
Yeah, precisely.
It's not just either or, but either when.
That's a good addition. Yeah, or both when.
Yeah.
As opposed to both and.
Yeah. My career is so much of the mind, the science and teaching and trying to figure out how to best craft all this stuff that occasionally, I used to say this even, when I was just starting out, it's like, I need a month of body work instead of head work. I want to go visit a farm somewhere and just hoe crops. I want to exhaust myself in some physical way and give my brain a rest. I mean, that never happened, but, I would get these
but the
cravings.
Sense of it. Yeah.
To just get out of this little box.
Mm. Mm.
And that's kind of what photography does. I've said this before, that the minute the lens hits my palm, I forget everything else. The only thing that's present is what's in the lens.
Have you always taken pictures, or is this a recent?
I first did a photography class when I was in high school. I learned how to develop black and white film and slides. And then I took one photography class when I spent a summer in northern Michigan at the biological station there. Then I really got into it when I started doing digital photography in about 2006. I went to Amsterdam in fall of 2006 and then to the Galapagos in February of 2007. And I had a little tiny Olympus, not even a real camera then. And I went through a pack of batteries every day. I was taking so many pictures. And it was shortly after that I got hooked up with Alan Murphy, the workshop leader I've done a number of workshops with. And I bought my first Nikon. And then another Nikon. And I'm so goofy about photography. All my cameras have names.
What are they called? Do you want to share?
So my first one, my little Olympus, was Olive. And then I got a Fujifilm that beeped a lot, so I called that one R2. My first Nikon, because it was so much bigger than these little point and shoots, was called Monster Cam, and the first big lens was called the Schnoz. They're minuscule compared to what I have now. My D3 was called Yukon because I bought it to go to Alaska. And then my D810 is Raven.
Cool. But do you not have, because I have a Nikon D5100 or something, I think it's called. That was the only one I went to. That was my 40th birthday present from my dad, because I was like, I want a real camera. It was the only one that actually fit my hands.
That's how I ended up with the D80. I actually went into a camera shop and held them And once I bought that one, because of the lenses, even though that was not a full frame camera, the D3 and the D810 are full frame, and the lenses don't match. But it was because my hand fit the Nikon as opposed to a Canon. That's why I ended up in the Nikon world.
Yeah.
And I can, even though the D810 is a bigger camera, it still fits my hand.
Yeah. Because I think that was so apparent, you know, as walking around there. I didn't really have any, you know, I didn't have any preferences, but it's like, and my hands aren't small necessarily. I've been told, but still, it was like, oh, these are just too big. I won't, you know. But that one fits me. It fits my hand. So I was like, I'll take this one, please. But yeah, it's interesting. But so why do you have so many different camera houses then? What's the difference in I mean, different lenses I get, but what's the difference in the different?
So, the longer the lens, the more it brings your subject to you. Mm-hmm. So for shooting birds that are quite skittish, you need either a 300 or a 500 most of the time, or longer. The problem is when the lens gets longer, the aperture capable gets smaller, and you need more and more light to shoot effectively. So there's always that trade-off. In Iceland in the summer, that's pretty easy because there's a lot of light. Mm-hmm. And so I shot mostly with the 300. My 300 is my lens of choice for doing eagles because they're big birds, and the quality of the glass is really good. Is Nikkor. I have a couple of zooms. Those are the 300 and the 500 only have that aperture, that lens size. That they're called prime lenses. Yep. And I have some zoom telephotos that go in and out, and those are pretty good. The aperture changes with the zoom length, so it's sometimes hard to set them while you're messing around. Mm-hmm. And for close-up work, you want a pretty big short lens. So I have a Nikon 105 that's great for doing butterflies and stuff. Then I have a landscape lens that's more wide angle, where you get more of the vista like the iPhone photo, where you can get a lot of stuff in there because you're looking for big and far. Mm. Although you can take good portraits with the landscape lens. So it'll focus closer. So that's an 18 to 35 lens. Mm. I'd like to get a 50 because that's a really good all-around portrait lens.
I have a couple of photographer friends. One who went to, I think they were in Thailand, Vietnam, India, somewhere. And he was like, he challenged himself. So he only took one of those fixed lenses. I don't know, 35 or, you know, I don't remember what it was. But something like it's like, okay, I'll just take this one. Just to challenge himself. It's like, how can I use this here and make, you know, images that... So it's like, again, it's that the boundaries can increase your creative output. You know, you just have this one. You don't have the full array. I thought that was kind of cool. And he took some gorgeous pictures, of course. But, yeah. Will you send me one of your or two or three Icelandic pictures that I could use in the pod description if you want, or if I may?
Yeah, it'll probably be over the weekend because
that's fine.
I haven't even downloaded my last card.
Yeah, it's fine.
So
it won't be published. I think this episode will be published in not upcoming Tuesday, but the next one. I think you're on. I might be lying, though. It might be another week. So,
Yeah.
I'm
kind of functioning at what my parents used to call Jewish Indian time. It's like, yeah, sometime. It will happen.
It will happen. That's great. Well, thanks, Beverly.
Thank you.
It was lovely to get a little bit of Icelandic vistas into this conversation.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful place. I mean, my biggest hope for it is that tourists like me don't destroy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one of my hopes about COVID, that it might, I hope it'll put a dent into sort of the non-regenerative tourism that goes on. Make it regenerative, make it in such a way that it benefits the people who go and the people who are there. And, it's like, so that we don't destroy.
Yeah. Take only photographs, leave only footprints, and not too many.
Precisely. Yeah. Thanks for today.
Thank you. It was good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a long time. We haven't spoken in a long time because you've been traveling.
Yeah. And Will-o'-the-Wisp.
Yeah.